last week you had names like James Cook and DeAndre Swift and Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, and Jaden Reed with the donut. I mean, these guys, they busted in fantasy football. They might be the reason you lost your week. Well, in today's video, I'm bringing you 5 players that could do the same. 5 guys I got bubble guts thinking about putting into that roster this week. I'll present my case and all the evidence, and ultimately you got to make the call with your roster. The first player, I'm not feeling it this week. That is DeAndre Swift at the Minnesota Vikings. So the Vikings, the 4th worst matchup for your fantasy running back this year. I mean, let's just think of some names that we've been starting most weeks this year that have busted. So, for example, Breece Hall. Breece Hall had 37 total yards, 2.6 yards per carry, bust. How about Jonathan Taylor? Jonathan Taylor, 59 total yards, 3.7 yards per carry, bust. How about Tony Pollard? Well, Tony Pollard had 29 total yards, 1.7 yards per carry, busted. The Minnesota Vikings, you do not attack this defense on the ground. All year, if you have tried to do that, it has not worked in your favor. Well, that's because they allow the 2nd fewest rushing yards per game, and where you attack them is through the air. They give up the 4th most passing yards per game. And with now Shane Waldron out of the picture, DeAndre Swift is not, getting these 30 touch type of games. You're starting to feature Keenan Allen. You're starting to feature Rome Odunze, DJ Moore. And the way to beat this team, again, is not on the ground. I want to remind you guys how easy DeAndre Swift's schedule was from week 5 to 15 when he was popping off in fantasy football. He faced the Panthers, who are one of the best matchups in fantasy football. The Jags, who are the 2nd best matchup in fantasy football. The Commanders, middle of the pack. The Cardinals give up the 10th most points. The Patriots give up the 8th most points. That was his schedule when he was popping off in fantasy football. Look at this, from week 4 to 10. You can see that was his good stretch of games. Well, look at the other matchups that were more difficult. He busted. I mean, the last 3 weeks, remember guys, we begged you to sell him before the New England game on this channel. We begged you to go out and sell him because the matchups were going to be so tough. But look at this, Minnesota, Detroit, San Francisco, in those last 3 weeks, complete bust. And it doesn't get any easier this week. This team is also tied for the 2nd fewest implied team point total on the week with just 18 points. If DeAndre Swift doesn't get a touchdown, I think he could bust. It could be a rough week for him. I'd rather start like a Ramondre Stevenson this week. I'd rather start a Rachaad White with or without Bucky Irving. Yeah, I'm saying it. I'd rather start Najee Harris. Doesn't have a great matchup himself. I'd rather start Rico Dowdle. Great matchup versus the Panthers. I'd rather start Isaac Correndo, of course, if he plays. I don't have that information at the time of recording this video. Second player, I'm a little bit nervous about. Love this player, but there are so many things that he can't control. And I'm not sure with your life on the line you want to trust it. Brian Thomas versus the New York Jets. Well, Jets right now, 13th worst matchup for your wide receiver. So they're more middle of the pack. This really isn't so much about the matchup. But, Sauce Gardner's probably going to cover him. Sauce Gardner hasn't been as good this year. But again, less about the matchup, more about the outside factors. Okay, for first thing here. One of the lowest over-unders of the week, and rightfully so. You got the Jets, you got the Jags. Okay? 40.5 point over under. The Jets are favored, obviously. But not only beyond the over under, if you look at total implied team point totals, well, they are tied for the 4th fewest points expected this week at 19 points. The Jags are. It's rough. All right. I mean, they won last week and they scored 10 total points. That's crazy. They won an NFL game and they scored 10 points. So 19, you're almost doubling their point total last week anyway. I'd rather start names like Keenan Allen. I'd rather start Khalil Shakir, Devonta Smith, who's been inconsistent, Darnell Mooney, Jerry Jeudy. We'd ride the hot hand there. We'd start Adam Thielen. Yeah, we'd start Adam Thielen against the Cowboys. I mean, add on to the fact that there's all these outside factors. You got Mac Jones playing quarterback. This entire offense is in disarray. I just don't know that you're going to find much success. Moving on to our third player here. We talked about him last week on the video, and plenty of people were like, you're an idiot. This guy's going to dominate. Isaiah Pacheco. We had him on the video last week. He busted. I'm sorry. Okay. But it's not a good setup for him again this week. He faces the Cleveland Browns. And while anything can happen, all right, there are some signs of life here. But while anything can happen, this is the 7th worst matchup for your running back this year. Saquon Barkley, the mighty Saquon Barkley, was held to 2.6 yards per carry and 54 total yards, under 8 points. Bust. Javonte Williams. Now, of course, Javonte Williams busted, but did you know how bad it was? He had 4 total yards. He had 0.3 yards per carry. He had a touchdown. He had 7 points. He had a touchdown with 7 points. Najee Harris got into the end zone last week, averaged 3.3 yards per carry, still under 12 points. Take away that touchdown, the guy has 5 points. There are certain reasons to be more optimistic about Isaiah Pacheco in the right matchups. I'm not sure this is that matchup, but let me just play good cop for a second. Well, last week, he had 32 snaps to 20 for Kareem Hunt, right? He had 18 total touches to 6 for Kareem Hunt. So that is a great sign. But there are still 3 running backs in rotation, sometimes 4 if Carson Steele gets out there. I mean, look at how they're deploying them. Sometimes they have 2 backs on the field. You've got Isaiah Pacheco out there, but both Kareem Hunt and Samaje Perine are splitting his carries in half. You can see early down, short yardage. Even on third downs, you almost never see Isaiah Pacheco. You don't see him in the 2-minute drill. So I still think they are slowly working him in. I'd rather start Ramondre Stevenson, Rachaad White, Najee Harris, Rico Dowdle, and Isaac Horrendo. Of course, again, if he plays. We don't know that at this time. The fourth player, Mr. Unlimited. Might be limited this week, though. Okay, against the Philadelphia Eagles. This is the worst matchup. There's not a worse matchup for your quarterback right now. The Eagles defense in the first 5 weeks compared to the rest of the season is a complete 180. They went from one of the best matchups to target to now one of the most intimidating matchups in fantasy football. I mean, they held the mighty Joe Burrow to 1 touchdown, 15 points. They held Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels looked lost for the first time. I say this as a Commanders fan. He looked completely lost on the field. He had under 15 points. The Eagles defense right now gives up the second fewest passing yards per game. They allow the fewest total yards per game to opposing offenses. And if you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, they're actually tied for the 4th fewest implied team point total with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars, whatever, okay? Now, anytime you're going into a week and you and the Jags had the same implied team point total, I've got some alarm bells ringing in my head. And you also add on to the fact that George Pickens probably not going to play this week. 90% chance he's not out there. So you don't even have your best weapon. Who are you going to throw the ball to? I'd rather start Anthony Richardson. I'd rather start Matt Stafford or Drake May. I'd rather start Aaron Rodgers and even Big Cock Brock. All right, last player. I don't see a single reason, guys. I don't see a single reason to trust this player this week. I haven't been more confident about a bust this entire year. Nick Chubb. You can't start Nick's got a big old Chubb. You can't do it. He has the worst matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. Stop thinking about the nostalgia. Stop it. All right? Slap you on the hand. Stop doing it, okay? You're only hurting yourself at this point. There's not a single lineup in fantasy football where Nick Chubb should be started. All right? He is not the same Nick Chubb. He doesn't look the same after the injury, and this is a terrible matchup. Guys, the Chiefs held Derrick Henry to 3.5 yards per carry and 10 points. Bijan to 1.9 yards per clip. J.K. Dobbins before his injury to 2 yards per carry. Madison, who was a starter at the time, to 1 yards per carry. Gus Edwards had a touchdown and still busted. That's the kind of defense we're talking about. I mean, last week I told you not to start Gus Edwards. Kind of the same exact thing. The same exact player who is not going to be on the field in passing downs. The Chiefs defense right now gives up the 3rd fewest rushing yards per game, allows the 2nd lowest yards per carry, and they give the 6th fewest total yards per game to opposing offenses. You beat this team through the air right now, not on the ground, and the usage just isn't there for Nick Chubb since he got back from week 7. I mean, Alexander Madison has a higher utilization rate. This is according to Fantasy Life. They do great work. Tank Bigsby has a higher utilization rate. Jerome Ford is out snapping Nick Chubb since he came back from that injury. The only metric where Jerome Ford is leading Nick Chubb is in rushing attempt share, and it's not even that impactful because, again, the Browns never run the ball. They are also tied for the 6th fewest implied team point total. I think Jameis is going to be throwing the ball all over the field. I don't think they'll rely on the run game. I'd rather start Kareem Hunt in a split role. I'd rather start Travis Etienne. I know that sounds sad. I'd rather start Javonte Williams. At least the matchup is decent. I'd rather start Jalen Warren or Zach Charbonnet or Sincere McCormick. Yes, this is real life. I'm telling you to start Sincere McCormick over Nick Chubb. This is the world we're living in. All right, we have to adjust. But those are 5 players I can't wrap my head around. Of course, I do not have a crystal ball. I can't tell you exactly how this is going to pan out. What you have to do is listen to the logic behind the takes and make a decision for yourself. I appreciate y'all watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button, show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. And what I'll say is if you have a tough start-sit decision this week, check out the pinned comment. You can ask me a question at any time on the Flock Fantasy website with that link. And if you don't have a free account over there yet, you can use the promo code LAND, LAND, to get a free account on sign up. And if you do, you'll get the My Teams feature, the expert consensus rankings, and the trade calculator all for free as a thank you from us, you know, just for kind of showing up and being there. We appreciate y'all big time. You know, thanks for being here. Good luck in the playoffs. You got this. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.